Hello, Gene the OK Boomer here. Welcome to today's vlog. Today I'm going to do something that I do only rarely, which is to reply to a commenter. One reason that I don't usually reply to comments is I don't get that many comments to which to reply in the first place. But also, I just believe that I have this vlog to say whatever I want, talk about whatever I want to for as long as I want. So I try to leave the comments for all of you to say what you want. And well, I was going to say I read every comment, but again, I get so few, it doesn't take much of my time to read them. But when I do reply, it's either to correct a fact that somebody got wrong that I think is important, or the person raises an interesting issue, which is the case today, something that I feel like talking about. So the reason I'm replying today is, well, I should give you some background information. I've mentioned this in the past. I am in Tennessee right now, just outside of Memphis. I moved here a couple years ago from New York City, where I lived for about 40 years. I moved there from Detroit, where I was born. I wasn't born in 1977, as you could probably tell by looking at me. That's when I moved to New York. I was born actually in 1952, before I'm sure perhaps all of you were born. Anyways, so I'm glad you were born and you're watching this. Anyway, this is going to be a little bit of stream of consciousness, I suppose, because I did a vlog way back in 2019. I'm linking to it in the description about what was called Why I Had to Leave New York and Move to, Why I Had to Leave NYC, New York City, and move to Tennessee. This was way back, but sometimes I get a comment on a video. It really surprises me, that a video that I did years ago. But this is going to probably be a little bit of stream of consciousness. I said at that time why I left New York, and it was because of all the problems that I saw in New York, and it just got to the point where I could no longer live there. I'm going to go through that today, but here's a comment. It's from, well, it says, I hope I'm pronouncing this correct, Banchanciertos Whitney, but I wonder if that's a last name, Banchanciertos, and Whitney is actually the first name. Either way, you can let me know in the comments, Banchanciertos or Whitney, whichever is correct. But I feel we can be on a first name basis, so you can call me Gene if you want. So here's a comment. You should see New York City now after COVID, nightmare city. And now I'll just tell you about New York. The reason I'm bringing this up now is partly because of that comment, and partly because I am planning to go back to New York. But I've been keeping up with New York. Whitney or Mr. Whitney, or Ms. Whitney, I'm not sure which is correct again. But anyways, this commenter, you should see New York City now after COVID, nightmare city. I've actually been keeping up with New York City, as I do, by the way, of my hometown of Detroit, even though I haven't seen it in over 40 years, probably 45 years by now. But it's my hometown, and I just read the news stories, and I look at YouTube videos, news reports. So I've been, I get articles from the New York Post, for instance. So I know what's going on there, and it is really distressing. The reasons I left were, well, I'm going to give you one reason right now. It has nothing to do with the coronavirus, but just for the heck of it. Oh, let me mention first that I really have, well, I'll save that for the end. I really have a lot of affection for New York, and I'm sad that I had to leave. There was so much about the city that I loved when I moved there. Of course, I was younger. I was only 25 when I moved there, but the energy and the culture and the outdoor, I really miss the restaurants and the outdoor restaurants, and you see these old buildings just sitting outside, you eat outside, and you see these beautiful old apartment buildings across the street, these brownstones. And here in Tennessee, you go to a restaurant, outside you see a parking lot, and cars parked out in a parking lot. So it's just not the same. It's just not the same. And well, the people are very nice out here. Just be clear about that. But there are a lot. I have to say, there's a lot of obesity out here, which really distresses me. I would think that the South would be the place where people would stay in shape, and New York, these would be the people that would be eating all this, carbohydrates and stuff, and they would be fat. But they were actually in pretty good shape. But also, I remember one of the reasons I moved to New York from Detroit in the first place was because of these. I went to visit with a friend. She had a brother who, back in Detroit, and then she had a brother in New York who was a reporter for the New York Times. So she went to visit. I went at the same time, and I went to this big dinner, and her brother, well, she was there, her brother was there, a reporter for the New York Times, and I met, back in Detroit, if you went out to dinner with somebody, somebody worked at a gas station, somebody worked at the Ford plant, somebody worked at the Verner's ginger ale plant, or some kind of job like that. But in New York, so a reporter from the New York Times sitting at the table, a television producer, an editor, I think, all kinds of just more stimulating people. I just have to say that. And again, the people here are nice, but you miss that sometimes. That was one of the reasons that got me to move from Detroit to New York. But as I lived there in the last few years, well, when I moved there in the 70s, there was a lot of problems there with crime and graffiti, and just, I myself was held up once. I got in a fight once. Mugged, actually, let's be honest. I was mugged. I was just walking across the school playground, the subway stop, and you walk across the school playground. It's a shortcut to my apartment at the time, and I got sucker punched out of nowhere. Somebody just punched me in the face. This was in the 70s. Then Giuliani got elected, though, and just turned the whole city around. It got much, much safer and pleasant. He went after what he calls the broken windows theory. I mean, he got it from somebody else, but the idea was that they were saying at the time, before he became mayor, why don't you don't worry about the little crimes and the petty theft and whatever, and the graffiti, go after the major criminals. And he said, well, no, that's wrong, or this theory said that, because let's say you're living in a beautiful neighborhood and then somebody breaks a window, and so it's a beautiful neighborhood and just that broken window, but nobody fixes it. Eventually somebody comes along and breaks another window, and so on and so forth, and then you've got, before you know it, urban blight. So he made a point of going after the little things, the graffiti on the subways, arresting those people, or the fare beaters, people who would jump the subway turnstile and not pay their fare. Things which would irritate people like me who would pay their fare and see this lawlessness just being not paid attention to. So he dealt with all. He cleaned up Times Square. When I moved there, it was all topless bars and these little souvlaki places, and it was a terrible place. It was a terrible place, and but it was safer, just dirtier and grimier and just more depressing. I lived there a couple, not in Times Square, but maybe like 3 blocks away. So I would go there pass through there often. But there was a certain energy, maybe because when you're young, and the rents were affordable. And I'm going to get to this in a moment. One of the reasons I left was because the housing was getting so, I'll tell you right now, that's one reason I had to move, because I was living down in Midtown West, it was called, around 47th Street. My rent was $175 a month. My next apartment, I got so poor I couldn't even afford the $175 a month. I was in a rock and roll band at the time. We had a rehearsal space in Long Island City, and I used to sleep on the floor there. I did that for about a year. I'll have to tell you that story sometime, what that was like. But I eventually found an apartment back in New York that I could afford, $200 a month on the Upper East Side. It was a junky apartment, but it was on the Upper East Side, and it was livable. It was tiny. But now, what would happen was the rents just keep going up, and for one reason or another, I would have to move, and I just got pushed farther and farther north. I ended up in Harlem, which was okay. The people in Harlem were actually very nice. Again, the people were nice there, but the apartment was tiny and it was affordable, but it was like $1,100 a month. It went up to, they have rent control there, so that makes the rent can only go up so much, but it also restricts the housing supply because people don't want to build if the rent is restricted. They'll build expensive apartments because rent stabilization, actually is what it's called, stops above $2,000 a month. So there's plenty of $2,000 a month and higher apartments, but for less you can't find anything because people don't move, because they can't afford to move to another apartment, because all the good apartments are over $2,000, and they're not very big, as you're going to see in a second. The cost of buying an apartment in New York City is just crazy. But all the problems that existed in the 70s, they were starting to come back after de Blasio, the Mayor de Blasio, got elected, and because it was great under Giuliani, it was this nanny statism with Bloomberg, who came after him, Mike Bloomberg. So he wanted to restrict you can't buy a 7-Eleven, a big gulp soda because that's the sugar, too much sugar. So you have to buy 2 of them to get the same results. Same thing as these toilets when they made the restricted flow toilet, so you just had to flush twice and use the same amount of water as more. Now I actually have one, a dual flush toilet, but let's not get off on that track today. But it's just that all the crime started. A German tourist got pistol whipped. Just some guy, she got robbed, and somebody just had a gun and just hit her in the mouth, knocked out all her teeth. A block and a half from my apartment in Harlem, somebody got shot across the street. There was these people would come out with a boom box, ghetto blaster in warm weather, and set it up on their stoop in front of their apartment across the street and just blast loud music that would go. I mean, I feel sorry for people with kids who had to sleep. They would just blast music until midnight, all through the warm weather, and I would call the cops every night. And sometimes they would come, sometimes they wouldn't. When they would come, so they would shut off the music, and the cops would leave, and the music would be loud. But to get to the comment, you should see New York City now. So this is what it was like when I moved. But now I was seeing the homeless people. You go into a Starbucks, and there would be a homeless person in front of it. There'd be homeless people sprawled out in the subway stop, the underground subway stop. But it's gotten worse from what I read. I'm really wary of going back. I'm probably not going to take the subway anymore because I read all these stories about people getting accosted on the subway, slashed on the subway, pushed off of subway platforms, syringes on the subway platform, on some of the stops that I used to use sometimes. I didn't see any of that. I'm reading about that now. 6th Avenue, Avenue of the Americas, 40th Street, that's Midtown. That is the main business district, and people just shooting up in broad daylight. I really can't believe it. On the one hand, I guess I'll have to see it for myself, but it's really distressing, and even more homeless people than ever now in Penn Station and sleeping in the subway stations and the subways. So Penn Station, I don't know what the problem was with the subways, but just the platform's just so crowded. But you can't walk through Penn Station, Pennsylvania Station on 8th Avenue. You can't in 34th Street, which is right by Macy's. And I just read about people shooting up right in broad daylight at the subway stop. Macy's is 34th Street, one block north of that. People shooting up right by the subway stop. It's really incredible to read that these things are happening in New York. And then I just read about the second shooting in Times Square. Times Square, now Times Square, this is what Giuliani did. He cleaned it all up. It looks like the Vegas Strip now. In fact, that's the law. If you open a business, you have to have these bright neon sign that it's almost as tall as a building all by itself, because that's the look that Giuliani wanted. So it's beautiful, but somebody being shot in front of a hotel, I've read about that twice. You can't compare today's Times Square with how grimy and dirty and dismal it was when I moved there in 1977, but I don't remember any shootings or anything like that. So the crime, it is just getting worse. And I guess as I said at the beginning, this would be a stream of consciousness vlog. It's just me venting, I guess, but it's really a shame because New York was such an exciting city when I moved there. For all its problems, it was so exciting, and you could afford, a poor person could, I came there with almost nothing. I was getting for a few weeks, I had, I think, like $5,000 or a couple $1,000 in savings, and I was getting $90 a month from Michigan unemployment from my last job. $90 a month they were sending it from Michigan, and I could live. I could survive there, and on rice and beans, admittedly, but I could survive. But now, that's what I wanted to mention. Oh, two things I wanted to mention. So let me, if you're still listening by now, one thing I want to mention is I put a link, but I'll put a little screenshot up here. If you're interested, New York apartments. Here's one, 29 West 64th Street, which would be right off of 5th Avenue, admittedly a really good neighborhood. But here it is. It's one bedroom, one bathroom, 800 square feet, $800,000. $800,000. You can see from the photo how narrow the living room is, and if you click on the link, you can scroll through a bunch of photos and see how small it is. And so you got the mortgage, you have the down payment, the 20% down payment. So that's number one, $160,000 or whatever. Then you have maintenance payment, which is, because this is a condo, so you have a $15 a month maintenance payment, maintenance fee every month on top of that, of the mortgage, and you would have taxes, real estate taxes, which would probably be about several $100s a month at least. And what does it say here? Yeah, the whole thing is 3 rooms, just 3 rooms, and you can see how small that room is. You pay $800,000, $1,400, $1,500 a month, and you walk outside your door and you see homeless people and people shooting up, heroin on the street. So that's why I had to move. And I'm just going to end by saying that I miss New York. I've said it before, not so much the place, but as a time, the kind of New York that existed, not just the New York definitely not New York as it is now, but there was just something about it. I mean, I literally get choked up sometimes when I listen to Gershwin's Rhapsody in Blue, because it's so evocative of New York. New York is like no other city in the world. And it's really, I even wrote a song about it. That's what I want to end on. I write songs. Maybe I'll put the website link of my music website. I invite everybody to visit it. But I wrote a song about New York and my feelings about what's happened to New York. And well, I linked to it, or I'm linking to it in the description, and you're invited to go listen to it, especially if you're from New York or if you're in New York, and see if it triggers any emotions in you. And that's it for today. Probably a long vlog. I went on for a while. I hope you were able to bear with me and that you got something out of it. I really do appreciate, in any case, the time that you spend with me. If you have any comments, questions, suggestions for future topics, there's a place below the video where you can put all those things. You could, if you're watching this on YouTube, you can give me a thumbs up. I'm also on Rumble, but I don't think they have a thumbs up. I'll have to check that out. You could subscribe. I love getting new subscribers. You could also share the video with anybody you think would like it. But most of all, come back and see me again. I would love to see all of you again. I look forward to seeing all of you again. And until I do see all of you again, bye.